Our next guest is one of the more prolific investors in Silicon Valley and a legendary entrepreneur. It's hard to describe him in a few words, but I'm going to try. Not only was he the co-founder of LinkedIn, but Reid Hoffman is an author and recently published a book on entrepreneurship. And he's also was an early investor in Facebook, Zynga, has led investments in Airbnb, and a number of other well-known Silicon Valley startups. Please welcome Reid Hoffman and my former boss, Michael Arrington, co-founder of TechCrunch and co-founder of Crunch Fund. Thanks so much.
Don't go. I'm still here. It was a year ago they fired me. So,
I was here when you pulled your T-shirt act.
And I said, it's dead now. Disrupt is over. And I think doesn't look too dead. There are more people here than have ever been at a Disrupt before, so they're doing fine without me. So.
Yes.
Okay, I have you for half an hour, and you said you would talk about anything that I want to talk about. So I have a few things. First of all, you are exceptionally wealthy now. And I want to know,
Awesome.
Yeah, oh, it is awesome. Yeah. What changes when you go from moderately wealthy to like just ridiculously wealthy to the point where you don't even get out of bed for less than $1 million opportunity? Like, what is it like? Do you fly private now? Is security a concern? Tell me,
Well, I mean, there is a bunch of weird things that come about from it. One of them is I had a long-term plan to be affiliated with some universities and had done things like teaching classes and other kinds of things. And it was really weird to have...
Like donating your time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also the intellectual architecture, like kind of interesting questions about how do you teach entrepreneurship, what should a modern university education be? And essentially, like overnight, all of those changed to donor relationships.
Okay.
Right? So like, for example, someone I'd been talking to about the intellect, like how do you teach entrepreneurship?
They changed it to a donor relationship?
They changed it.
Yeah, like, hey, Reid, we love you giving us your time, but how about a lot of money?
And how about like I show up and I'll bring the chancellor of the school, right? And we'll sit here and talk to you about it. And how about I give you a review of everything the school is doing in the last couple of years?
You feel like people only care about your money now.
Well, it's not that as much as because their job is raising money, that basically means that in the vast majority of all nonprofits and everything else, now the principal touch point is, what money can you give us?
Yeah.
Right? So you're approached as a quasi-cash register.
What else, though? Do you only fly private now? Do you have your own Boeing jet?
I don't. I certainly don't have a jet, although I do fly private some. It's one of those classic, it's actually, for me, it sounds so weird as kind of something to whine about on the stage. But
go for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what a surprise. It's like, well, should you fly private or should you fly commercial? Commercial is more eco. It's more with the kind of the middle class values that I hold dear. On the other hand, flying private's a lot more convenient.
Yeah.
Right? And so, it's kind of a blend these days. But I would never have imagined that I would ever have flown in a private plane by myself, and now I have.
Just you and the pilots. That's it. That's awesome.
But I never would, like, it's uncomfortable to think about because I'd rather not have, anyway, but I did.
You want to, I also want to talk about your book. So you co-wrote a book called The Startup of You earlier this year. It came out. You've sold how many copies?
I think about 120,000.
That's pretty good for a nonprofit book. So you feel like it's changing lives? Do you have a good feeling about it?
It's interesting. In the consumer internet space, we're generally used to much larger scale numbers, right? So, LinkedIn growing at 2 members per second, et cetera, get to much larger numbers. So when someone says 120,000 to you as a number, it's like, okay, that sounds like a small number.
But from authors I know, that's pretty awesome for that kind of book.
Yeah, and it's hard to know what the ultimate impact is. Ben and I did it because we wanted essentially to get out this new meme of how to think about work and a career that people hadn't really gotten to yet. And we're still hopeful to have that kind of meme transformation, that kind of the stop thinking of his career ladder, stop thinking it as kind of a linear progression, think of it more as a jungle gym, think of it more as kind of how do you invest in yourself as an entity. And thus far, I'd say that the people who read the book really like it, but I don't think we've created that movement.
And you're going to keep trying to do that.
Yeah, off and on.
So I just want to talk about, you spend part of your time at LinkedIn as the executive chairman. You're very active there. You seem, every time I've met with you the last couple of years, it's always been there. You're a partner at Greylock. You're obviously very active there. I want to talk a little bit about those entities, but I'd also just want to tap into your brain on some of the bigger issues of the day to the extent you're willing to talk about them. So I'll jump around a little bit. But the first is, I'd like to talk about Facebook a little bit. You were one of the very first investors. You invested at it was $5 or $6 million valuation. How much did you invest in that round?
$37,500.
You invested $37,500 at a $5 million valuation in Facebook. So that worked out extremely well for you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think? What do you think right now at multiple splits, $20 a share, whatever it is? You think it's a good buy now or no?
Well, I'm a big believer in Facebook's long-term position. The real question is how it plays out over the next year or two in terms of whether or not you should. I suspect that if it continues at this price, that it will be a good buy either now or at some point.
Yeah.
Because I think that their ability to accomplish fairly significant things is unparalleled. I think that the people's hand-wringing about not making money on mobile, I think, is an innovation problem that's actually not that hard to solve.
Yeah.
And I think that the executive team there is actually very strong. And so.
Yeah.
Given all that, and given its a billion users, billion
Yep.
plus, and a huge amount of time, I'm very bullish on the future prospects. Whether or not I would give someone advice to buy someone, so how do you make decisions about pricing, share size, all the rest of that is actually very challenging.
So you don't think you can really say, without the benefit of hindsight, you saw errors that they just were obvious?
No. I mean, it's kind of a question of and with that large of an allocation, you could say, look, would you want more people who are just purely long-term? But with that large of an allocation, you're basically getting everybody.
So you're on the boards of, obviously, LinkedIn, Airbnb, Mozilla, Zynga, among others. Chat about Zynga a little bit, because they're in a tough spot. What are those board meetings like? Is Mark throwing furniture around the room, or?
Well, Mark's not the throwing furniture type. I mean, Mark is very committed. I think that. So on the positive column is, I think the social gaming space is still really interesting. Zynga has the best position on it. Mark has the right kind of very fast creative cycle, which is useful to this.
Yep.
On the negative side, they didn't diversify their platform fast enough, so when they hit some bumps, the bumps hit them as opposed to evening it out, whether it's mobile and other kinds of things. The company knows they need to do that. I think that they have a really interesting network of games that allows them to launch new games, but you have to launch games in the right time frame in order to make that happen.
Okay.
So I think the path forward is relatively straightforward for the company in order to get back into kind of good graces. And Mark's committed to making it happen.
What's your favorite Zynga game?
Scramble with Friends. I like the With Friends franchise. It's perfect. It's 2 minutes in terms of a break. You can talk trash to someone as they're beating you, or
Which
you're
I
beating
enjoy
them.
doing. Okay.
I'll play Scramble with Friends with you.
Let's do it. Greylock Discovery Fund. This is always an interesting topic of the big venture funds doing angel investing, because one is it tends to screw up the pricing for smaller angel investors, like me, for example, so we get a little annoyed. But also the big funds bring a lot to the table. Yeah, but we call it, anyway, it's not about me, it's about you. So so you've got you're doing these angel, sometimes you don't follow on, or you almost never do. Just tell me about that. How's the Discovery Fund going? How many companies have you done? Do you like the program? It's 2 years old now?
It's 2 years old. We actually announced it here with you 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We have about 75 companies. A bunch of the companies have gotten follow-on of the 2010, 2011 class. 40% of them have gotten follow-on financing. I think only 1 or 2 have gone out of business. The rest of them actually are kind of still in that long burn rate.
Yeah.
The follow-ons, we've led a couple of them. Benchmark, Andreessen, Khosla, Index have all led, various deals on the Discovery Fund. We're actually quite pleased with it. It helps us create, part of the whole idea was to have a network of companies that we provide services to. Like we have, what do you do with data in the modern world? How do you do PowerPoint decks? What do you do in terms of solving distribution problems? We have those as events for early stage companies. And it actually allows us to collaborate with some interesting entrepreneurs that otherwise, on the kind of standard venture model, of only a board seat and a certain percentage. You just kind of say, call me when you're ready, but I can't work with you early. And so all of that, I think, has been great.
So you like it.
Yes.
I have $15 million down. Is that how much has been invested over 2 years, or is that per year?
No, $15 million over 2 years.
So you're putting $7.5, $8 million a year into these companies.
Yep.
Okay.
We're pretty selective. Most of them are about 100K, and then occasionally we'll go north of that.
Okay. So you guys are doing a lot of other stuff. You just had some kind of hackathon, hackfest in July, and how'd that work out? Is that you like this stuff?
Well, part of what we're trying to do is how do you work with really early stage, high talent engineers, product design people, and both help them with companies and help them route them into companies. That's part of what this whole model that I think about in this kind of Venture 2.0. And so one of the things we decided to do was the first ever kind of venture fund, backed hackathon.
Yeah.
Right. And we got 150 people, 44 teams.
Yeah.
We brought in, because the whole idea is how do you connect people in the ecosystem the right way. We brought in kind of judges from various portfolio companies.
Yeah.
So we had from Wrap and a bunch of other companies there, kind of working with them from the early stages, connecting this talent to these companies. And then the final judges were Kevin Systrom, Mike Olson, Mike Schrepfer, and myself to judge the finalists in terms of
There were 150 teams. So you sat through 150 pitches?
people, 44 teams.
Okay.
10 into the final became finalists.
Okay.
And then we selected the 3 of the 10.
So you only sat through 10 pitches.
Yes,
Okay.
I was actually out of state, so I flew in literally just in time to make the last
Okay.
judging.
Did you fly in private?
Yes.
Only person on the plane?
No.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. Makes me feel like a carbon debt. I look like it's eco cloud, hanging over me.
Okay, now I'm going to ask a really boring question, then it's all good stuff after this, from my point of view. You said that, you told me in our prep that you think Greylock has, in your opinion, the strongest enterprise investment team in the business.
Yep.
And I said, ugh, enterprise, right? I like Ferraris, not mufflers. And then you said some stuff and I wasn't listening. Okay, let's talk about that just a little bit, and then I have some really good stuff to say. So
clearly he's not going to be listening to me now either. But look, one thing is, actually, I think the next cycle and the IPOs are going to be really interesting enterprise business. So for tech business, you have to be interested. And the second thing is that most of what's interesting happening out of enterprise has its roots in consumer. So it's part of the synergy of the consumer enterprise business. But when you look at, a company we can't talk about, Workday, because it's in registration, but Anil Busri and Ashim have done all kinds of, Palo Alto Networks, Cloudera, ServiceNow, Pure Storage, yeah. Right. Companies that run the backbone of how these businesses work.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, I figured that was your response. But look, I think part of what's been really interesting for me is an unexpected benefit of joining the venture side is learning a whole bunch about enterprise, because actually there's substantial game-changing companies. Because if you can make how all businesses work much more efficiently, much more effectively, that's another way of changing the world.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love enterprise. All those deals go to Pat Gallagher at Crunch Fund, and he loves that stuff. So
Yes.
apparently we're making money on some of them as well. So
Funny that.
all for it. Okay, so Marissa Mayer, she's now the CEO of Yahoo.
Yep.
All I really want to ask about this is her pregnancy. Do you think it's ridiculous for her to, be having a baby and be the CEO? No, I'm kidding. That's not what I want to talk about. I wrote a whole article about how ridiculous. No, so what do you think? Like, is it a new hope, or is it like just some weird?
I think it's definitely a new hope. I think one thing I think was really good about what the Yahoo board did in selecting Marissa was selecting a product person, because I think that these technology companies, the strategies are inherently driven by product, and so you need someone who is inherently a product person in order to really drive it. And I think that was
somebody with an engineering degree, for example.
Yes, engineering degree, focus on product, focus on design. I think that's exactly right in terms of selecting a person.
But what about her? I get why Yahoo wants her. It was her wanting Yahoo. Is that the part that I'm like, huh?
Well, I haven't talked to Marissa since then. She's been really busy, so I don't have it actually from her own words. But I suspect that she looked at it as a really interesting challenge with some interesting, valuable product assets that can actually be taken to the next level. And she's like, okay, this is a challenge that's, it's a next step up from what I'm doing and be fun to do. It'll be hard work, but Marissa works really hard. Now, I think one thing I think it's important to stay in kind of a public context about this is classically the way markets and investors treat this is they kind of think a turnaround is a 3-month or a 6-month gig. A turnaround like this is a 1 to 3 year gig, maybe emphasis on 3. So I would emphasize to the board, public shareholders, give the time to play it out, right? Because it's not one of those things where you get around January and say, you know, what have you done for me now? Because if the turnaround was really then all you really did is trim some cost, you know, over revenue, and you're not really investing in the future.
Okay. Have you seen the news last week about Paul Graham at Y Combinator? With Google, he criticized Google Ventures privately. It leaked and it became a public discussion. I don't think we need to talk about that specifically, unless you. But the question I want to ask is, what do you think about Y Combinator? Is it getting too big? Do you think that maybe there's some kind of stress? Because that's what I.
Well, I think they're definitely seeing some stress signs from the size, like the class, them knowing all the class in depth, them being able to provide the right level of help on the current infrastructure. The question of, you know, like, are they really up to speed and helping everyone as much as they want to? Like, I think this is all just from their perspective, which is, I think, correct. I think that they're, you know, kind of making a decision between, you know, like, do we stay at this level and gear up our services? Do we take it down a little bit? You know, do we gear up higher and really gear up our services? I think is a strategic cycle for them. And I think that, you know, part of the thing I think is awesome about what Y Combinator is doing is they're trying to fight this notion that there's only, like, say, you know, 5, 10, 15 companies per year that matter. And we can add more like by getting a broader set of founders actually creating things, we can add more possible breakouts to the pot. And I think that's a really good mission, and I think that they're good additions for that. And so I think that whether they decide to go smaller in size or larger in size, I think they know what they're doing and they'll do it the right way. But this works for consumer apps too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that there's all kinds of areas where new kinds of software, new kinds of devices will be created both in consumer and in enterprise. You know, obviously what's going to really happen on mobile is still yet really to play. And so I think that just saying, oh, look, all the interesting things have been invented is just...
Well, so to put this further into context, Paul Graham wrote an article yesterday called Farming Black Swans. And he talked about Peter Thiel's talk a while ago. We're now referencing like third party indirectly, but it doesn't matter. He said Peter has a Venn diagram that has, he's like, you know, it has to, for ideas to get traction and to get investment and people, it has to sound like a bad idea, because if it wasn't, somebody's already done it. You know, so he drew a circle. It sounds like a bad idea, but it actually has to be a good idea for it to work. And so he has another circle that says actually is a good idea, and it's the overlap between sounds like a bad idea and is a good idea that's interesting. And you know, what do you think about that? And, you know,
well, I think one of the really key things for most really significant companies is you need to have enough traction without competition. It's not from the big companies. It's from other startups, where you begin to establish a basis, and then it later becomes understood to be a really great idea. LinkedIn had that characteristic, Google had that characteristic, Facebook had that characteristic as an investment. Everyone knew it was highly active on college students, but all the discussion there is it wouldn't spread past college students, it would never monetize, all of these kind of classic things. So to have a great investment, either as a founder or as an investor, is you want to be contrarian and right. So contrarian is, one version of contrarian is it seems like a bad idea. Another version of contrarian is people just don't see it. They don't see this trend coming, they don't see that happening, and then you want to be right about it. And so the problem is if it's an idea that lots and lots of people have, then people have been trying it a bunch, there's a huge amount of competition, and that makes it very difficult to make it into a huge company.
For me, Uber was this way. I mean, I'd never thought about Uber as possible. And then Travis, one day we were driving, he told me about Uber, it just launched. I was like, oh my God, it's one of the things, like, how did I not think of that? Like, how did I think about, you know, basically, it's not exactly Airbnb for cars, but it's just, I can't live without it now. So what is the thing that is like, once we hear it, it's like, oh my God, that's it. You must have one or two of those up your sleeve, right?
Not necessarily.
You don't have ideas every day like that?
No, I mean, well, most of my ideas, I like to have entrepreneurs come and bring me their ideas, because actually those are the ones that are like your experience with Travis,
like
which is that's awesome. But I think that there is, you know, I think that the fact that there's going to be more of those every year in a vibrant, innovative economy is just a fact.
So David was completely wrong.
Yes.
David was completely wrong. Twitter, the way they're acting is partially bullshit. Yahoo might or might not be a buy. What else did we get out of today? You like Craigslist. Say one more, just say one thing that's semi-controversial before we go.
Semi-controversial?
Yeah.
All right, that's a little
I mean,
hard.
Twitter, they really screwed you guys over, right? And all you're saying is partial bullshit. I think you can just say, like, what did you say around the office when you first heard about it? Did you say, this is partially bullshit, or did you say...
That's a good question. You know, I think we were alarmed at, like, okay, you know, one of the things we had wanted was we wanted to have the liquidity,
Yeah.
you know, of kind of
So it was full bullshit.
of a set of status
Yeah.
updates, and so, and we thought that was most naturally part of the Twitter sphere as a way of doing it, and that's part of the reason we still allow people to tweet out, right, when they're posting it on LinkedIn. But it's, but we were very pleasantly surprised.
At their partial bullshit.
No, at the fact that the product actually got better.
Oh, that you didn't actually care once it was gone.
Yes.
All right. Thanks very much, Reid. Appreciate your time.
Yep. Great to see you.
Disrupt.